Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another round of the Middle of the Pack Racing League Fall Into PCUP Cup Championship for 2025. Brought to you on the Premier Sim Racing platform, available only on PC, known as iRacing. This is the championship that looks to decipher who is the master or mistress of the Porsche 992 GT3 Cup Car Racing Machine. Arguably one of the hardest machines to conquer in road racing, with its lack of an anti-brake lock system, plus also what would be a traction control system as well. These Porsche Super Cup car specification machines are some of the very hardest to drive, but some of the most rewarding when you get it absolutely right. And in the first half of the season, we got to see some absolutely rewarding moments for our drivers in both the Pro and AM classes, and after a midweek break, we are back once again to complete the second half of the season, with round 5 of 8 seeing us make our way to Spain for the MotorLand Aragón circuit. A circuit that's quite young compared to many of its counterparts on the European continent, having only opened up in the last 20 years. It is a circuit that has already impressed on the road racing stage and also on what is both 4 wheels and 2 wheels, with its combination of wide open track racing surface, some rather narrow apexes, long straights, sweeping bends, and some rather aggressive elevation changes intermingled into it all. Indeed, it is a circuit that much love, whether it be a spectator or racing driver, for the fact this is a circuit that keeps drivers guessing all the way to the checkered flag. But where are my manners? Allow me to welcome you all to this post-round broadcast live from circuit side for your viewing pleasure, and you're tuning in right now via one of 2 media platforms for your availability. The first of which being on YouTube at youtube.com. and search for TX11TX, alternative Paul Walsh, and welcome to you guys and girls tuning in via YouTube. The other media platform, of course, is on Twitch, at twitch.tv/TX11, and welcome to you guys and girls tuning in via Twitch. Now, regardless of what media platform you're tuning in via, your commentary and your hosting will be brought to you by myself. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX11 or Britain's Bit, depending on what media you follow me on, and I will bring you all your racing action as it unfolds over the entirety of this season. Now, to be clear, this is a post-race broadcast, so what does that exactly mean? Well, this broadcast itself now, as we're talking through things, is actually live, but the racing itself is not live. The racing occurred earlier this week on Wednesday, the 5th of November 2025, but we're bringing it to you this Sunday, the 9th of November, as if it were live. That means here in the content booth, we do not know how our drivers get on in the practice session that's currently ongoing, nor the qualifying session that's upcoming, or the race, which is around the corner, and therefore it's as close as possible to the raw live viewing experience for you guys and girls tuning in at home. And of course, if you are tuning in right now, knowing the results of any of those sessions, we do kindly ask no spoilers, please, not just for us here in the content booth, but perhaps more importantly for the viewers at home that are waiting to find out how it all plays out. Speaking of our schedule for today, times in Greenwich Mean Time, that's GMT, or you know, so called a time at UTC. What we can see is we are back to our sprint round format for the next 3 rounds, including this one. And therefore, it does mean that at 10 past 5 this afternoon, we're making our way into our qualifying session. 10 minutes in duration, all the drivers out there in low qualifying session looking to go for gold or pole position, and whoever gets it best, they'll be starting right at the front for what will be our 35-minute sprint race, due to get underway at just after 20 past 5 this evening. But as we make our way into this round, it's only fair that we recap the story so far and see what we've got lying in wait then, as we've got another 4 rounds to go. And as we can see, last time out, we wrapped up the Middle of the Pack Racing League Cup, the first 4 rounds of the season, with a visit to downtown Long Beach in the US state of not Los Angeles, there, of California, and indeed in the Los Angeles County. I finally get it right there, and I do apologise for those of you of a geographical inclination. We've got our states and counties in the right order. But what we got to see in the American Street Circuit, there was some absolutely phenomenal battling. And whilst Jason Landry may finish second best to Matt Best at Long Beach, with Best finally achieving what he's been chasing for several seasons in the Middle of the Pack Racing League, to put one over Jason Landry. It was Jason Landry who was able to secure the Middle of the Pack Racing League Cup with that performance, and he's been able to maintain his championship lead. However, that will be the last we see of Jason Landry for the remainder of this season, given the fact he's no longer able to make the racing rounds for the remainder, and therefore a vacuum opens up at the top, and it is going to be none other than Matt Best who takes over that power vacuum, at least for now. And as we'll see on the champion point shortly, he'll be looking to maintain that vacuum for as long as he possibly can. Meanwhile, in the AM class, well, the story there was about Shahi Zahir returning to winning ways, despite the fact that Blake Phillips was able to keep him honest for the most part in the American circuit. And the AM class is absolutely fired up, and we can expect the battles to go down to the wire week in, week out. But as we make our way into this second half of the season then, well, of course, the Middle of the Pack Cup is where it all play out, and we begin in Spain on the MotorLand Aragón circuit. But after this, we make our way to Japan for a double-header beginning at the Okayama International Circuit, previously known as TI Ida, and then we'll be heading to Motegi, the Twin Rim Motegi circuit, the home of Honda, if you will, for round 7 and 8, our final sprint race round of the season. And after 19th of November, on the 26th of November, we'll bring proceedings entirely to a close with a visit to Australia, but perhaps to the lesser known on the international scale, but much loved domestically, Phillip Island Circuit. Well, their sweeping curves, twists and turns, and very long straights will be welcoming our drives home and will be welcoming our championship winners. So therefore, plenty to look forward to as we make our way into the second half of the season. And let's talk a little bit about the championship standings and where the points sit as well. Because we start off with the Pro Drivers' Championship, and what we can see here is that Jason Landry, now absent for the remainder of the season, leads at 182 points, and therefore he does still have the best part of 35 points over the entirety of the field. But one would imagine that the field will gradually catch up and surpass him. And when it does, will it be Matt Best, currently the leader of the rest of the field, who will be to pass him first? Argue on paper, yes, given the fact he does have a 33-point advantage over Tom Brice. However, never say never, and expect there be plenty of twists and turns as this season continues to roar through to its natural conclusion. For Tom Brice, he's got the pressure of Jaden Callaway, only 8 points behind, and it's a further 18 points to Julian Jones, who sits in 5th, and right now has the growing presence of David Adie and James Logston, both with 8 points behind him. And Daniel McConnell's only a further 3 behind. Then we do have Edward Offred and Justin Braggett completed your Pro Class Championship. As for the AM class, well, here the complexion is a little bit different. We don't have a runaway leader here in the form of Shahi Zahair. In fact, he is only a step away as a leader from Blake Phillips, with a gap between the two being 7 points, and Shahi Zahair does have 3 wins to Blake Phillips' 1. However, Blake Phillips definitely has been keeping Zahair honest every step of the way. Glenn Bratton, meanwhile, he holds on to 3rd. He's continued to stay within touching distance to the top 2, and he's keeping himself well clear of the rest of the field, with the best part of a 27-point advantage over Mark Senegal, who sits in 4th, and there's a further 9 points to Jermaine Warren in the fight for 4th place. But Wood Costa will also involve himself in that, as will Nick Bader, as they're only a further 4 and 5 points behind respectively. There's Aaron Lahr bringing up the rear of the field on 71 points. Let's come to our circuit for today then, and it is none other than the Outer Loop, or the road course layout, as we'd also like to refer to it, of MotorLand Aragón, located near the city of Alcaniz in the Teruel region of the Aragonese state of Spain. Well, a big thank you to iRacing.com, not just for their brilliant simulator, but also for the fantastic track maps that are contained within it. And this two-dimensional image really brings to life all the different potential layouts of MotorLand Aragón. But what we can see, unlike the Grand Prix layout, which would see our drivers at turn number 12 go through a chicane sequence of corners, or a double-header chicane, and also see them go all the way down to a hairpin and the most, what would be rightmost part of the diagram. Instead, we have a big sweeping curve at turns 11 and 12, and also a big sweeping bend at turns 13 and 14 to bring our drives back onto the start-finish straight to go through the laps once again. But before they can get to that big long stretch, well, they've got a good run of elevation changes, plenty of uphill rises through turns 2, 3 and 4, and through 5, 6 and 7. It's all going to be able to breaking through curves there and trying to now direction change and also braking force, but they make their way down into what is effectively the Spanish corkscrew of Sacarachos at turns 8 and 9, and there it's going to be very tight, and you can only go 1 wide. But if you try to go 2 wide there, it's possible, only if you and your rival will be respectful to each other. As they make their way out to turn 9 and onto Marc Marquez curve at turn number 10, that's where it's going to be full throttle, or the target will be to roll all the way down to the end of the lap, and then make the way onwards to victory. But before we go racing, a quick reminder of the rules. We're not allowed to go racing without them. As this is a sprint race round, we return to the sprint race full set, and drivers are running a fixed setup as provided by the Middle of the Pack Racing League. Fuel loads have been restricted to 40%. Qualifying that's about to come up, that's closed qualifying format, which will be lasting 10 minutes in total, where our drivers will not have any overtime available. Once the clock strikes 10 minutes, that's it. They can't finish the lap they're on. They need to get their laps done within the 10-minute window. As for the sprint race itself, it shall start via a standing start, as is the tradition of Porsche Cup racing, with each driver having 1 fast repair available should they need to use it, and the driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 15 or more instant points. But without the further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be right back because qualifying is just around the corner. Well, let's see how our drivers get on when they're put to the test of the ultimate pace lap. And so we come back to qualifying then. 10 minutes, it's go, go, go for all of our drivers, and everyone who wants to be out there as quickly as humanly possible, including Mark Senegal, of course, who's the very first to leave the pit lane in his own lone qualifying session. But as he makes his way on out, we do say hello to a good number of you in the YouTube and the Twitch chat, including Matthew Best there in the YouTube chat. Well, good to have you with us, Matt. And indeed, saying that because it's a Sunday, gives you an opportunity to see a live view of the race for once. Well, that's absolutely fantastic, and glad to have you with us, and glad to have you tuning in. I hope you're doing well, my friend. But as Senegal makes one out here, what does it take to deliver an absolutely pitch-perfect qualifying lap at MotorLand Aragón? Well, simply put, you need to be delicate with direction change around here. A lot of these corners, they are very deceptive in their nature, whereby you've got a big open road racing surface, you've got plenty of outside and inside curb, and therefore you think you can run this circuit from corner to corner and curb to curb. Not quite, in the fact that many of the braking zones here have very niche aspects to them, particularly in the first half of lap, whereby you've got to focus on the fact that coming through what is turn 5 in towards 7, you're braking essentially on the exit of 6, you're braking as the car's still rotating through the corner in order to get set up for turn number 7. And the same can be said from turns 3 through to 5, where the braking zone for turn 5 is at the apex of turn number 4. So you've got to know your lines absolutely spot on, and if you know your lines perfectly, that's when the good laps start to appear. However, then you've also got to consider your corner exits, with every mile now to the next corner absolutely critical, not necessarily just in qualifying but in the race, because otherwise in race conditions, if you're not one step ahead of your rivals, it will encourage them to dive up your inside, and in qualifying as well, every mile per hour is the difference between a tenth of a second of missing out on pole and being a tenth of a second ahead in taking pole position, as Mark Senegal crosses the timeline there and goes on to his first flying lap. Now he easily does so, we need to introduce 2 new drivers to the grid today, one of whom is Joshua Dillon, as he makes one through, both in the AM class, and Dillon's going to be representing the AM class in the number 280 machine, and we're very happy to see him out there today as he makes his debut round, and as he roars as well up the hill, he goes on to his first flying lap of his middle of the pack racing league career, and Anthony Piper as well makes way onto the grid in the shark face machine, and can he snatch the jaws of victory from what would be, well I was going to say the jaws of defeat there, but he'd be grabbing jaws from 2 places. I think I've completely minced that quote up, but as number 3 driver makes his way around here, mark my words, he's not mincing anything at the moment as he comes through turns 1 and 2 and just scoops his way up the hill, and wish the best luck to both of them as they make their first entries into the full Into PCUP Championship for 2025 and also in the middle of the pack racing league career history. But as Piper comes on through there, looking absolutely smooth as he makes his way around the corners. He was looking quite quick, to be fair, in the practice session. He was at one point the second fastest up until the very end, where he did have a couple of drivers start to go faster, but Piper seemed to get those times together nice and early on. And you'll notice that he's not being too aggressive towards the apex at the moment. If the car's running a little bit deep, such as what it did there at turn number 7, he's intentionally letting the car drift wide slightly, misses braking zone entirely there, coming down into turns 8 and 9, goes straight onto the gravel there. So we were praising him, and suddenly praising him a bit too much perhaps, and well, the commentator's cursor's already struck here today for Anthony Piper in the fact that it goes straight on, but it's an easy mistake to make, and with no ABS or anti-lock braking system, well, it does mean that for our drivers, if they do miss their brake marker, stamping on the brakes is not the way to do it, unlike your regular GT3 machines, which do of course have ABS where you can stamp on the brakes and therefore the electronics offset any potential brake locking. Well, in these cars you don't have the electronic package available, it's switched off by default, unless of course you're racing in what would be non-Super Cup racing regulations, whereby we will see the ABS on, and I believe that is coming to the Super Cup series as of 2026 in real life, and I suspect it will be translated into iRacing from what I gather, for the simple reason that iRacing does like to follow the Porsche Super Cup rulebook wherever possible, and the Super Cup rulebook is likely to bring the ABS in and keep traction control off. But as best makes his way around here, our pro leader at the moment in terms of times, 1 minute 38.644. Well, he's not having any signs of lockups at the very moment, at least, as he comes around in the number 11. And the Texas Speed Sim Racing driver here, well, right now coming into this round off the back of a win, a very valuable win to him. And as he scoops his way through turns 8 and 9 here, you just see the direction change and how he's having to be so delicate with the car as he now brings his way through Marc Marquez, named after, of course, the infamous motorcycle racer hailing from Spain. And as he comes out of that corner now, it can be a nice long flat out run all the way through the kinks of turns 11 and 12, whereas normally you'd be getting yourself set at the moment to go into a heavy braking zone here for the Grand Prix layout. Not so, and instead he can just focus on bringing the car around. The wonderful thing about this, of course, is the fact that it will therefore be an opportunity for those who are tailing our leader in the race to be able to brought back in with the slipstream, but it does also put a bit of pressure on our leading drivers to try and make the breakaway as early as possible for the first half lap, because they're not able to get that gap up to a second by the time they come out to turn number 10, and the slipstream will just gradually bring the field back together. But as Best makes his way up towards the timeline, what's it going to be this time around? His second flying lap on the board, and as he does so, well, it's a 1 minute 38.168, a lovely lap there, and Senegal's gone a bit fast as well, 38.745, but Best right now, the fastest of the pros, and overall, Mark Senegal the fastest of the AMs, as Shahi Zahair goes on to 4th place. Joshua Dillon, meanwhile, is making his way around, and we're going to jump aboard with Dillon here for a flying lap on his debut. He's looking quite quick at the moment as we briefly lose him, and he rematerialises from the ether as Dillon comes across that timing line, goes into 3rd place, but as he breaks way to turn number 1, let's give you the onboard lap. So a 90-degree left-hander there, coming all the way down for the 100-metre mark to third gear. Now flat out he goes through turn number 2. Keep an eye not to run too wide as he heads up the hill. Just about with track limits there, lifts off the throttle, drops the gear, held in 4th gear. Ooh, goodness me, coming loose there as he comes out of 3rd. Braking out of the apex to turn number 4 now to come into turn 5. Dropping the 2nd gear now as he makes way out to left-hander, bring the car slightly over and then straight line over the apex to turn number 6. Set up your braking zone for the very long run into turn number 7. It seems to never stop. Dylan right now driving on the ragged edge of adhesion here as he goes a bit wide there coming out of turn number 7. This is a scrappy lap to begin it. Can he bring it back towards the end as he comes down into turn 8, braking at the 150-metre mark, all the way down up to 4th briefly and then back down to 2nd. I wonder if that's a mistake from Dylan, or Turty. He's done that intentionally to try and cut all the wheel spin on the rear axle. If that is genuine, well, it's a very different technique. If it's a mistake, I suspect he's rattled himself as he runs out wide. And for Joshua Dylan, that is going to be an invalidated lap there as he comes out of turn number 11. That's not the way to do it, but you can understand he is pushing to the limit right now. But Dylan really struggling on this lap, and I suspect he's gone quickly to go to 3rd, and he's probably thinking, what do I need to do to beat Senegal? Well, the simple answer on paper is you need to find a 10th of a second. The difficult question is, where does he find that 10th? And the answer is he hasn't quite been able to find it yet. He now makes his way through the long sweep and left-hander, turns 13 and 14. And as he does so, Dylan right now on the absolute limit once again. Rear of the car sliding loose everywhere right now. And I suspect this is going to be a lap to forget for Dylan. And he's going to stay in 3rd place. He parks up. Meanwhile, we've got some drivers still out there at the moment. Best Senegal, Dylan and Zuhair. They have all come into the pit lane. I do believe as well they only have 3 flying laps available to them, plus the out lap. So therefore, we do still have a good number of drivers who've yet to complete all those laps. Albeit Jermaine Warren making his way up the hill, as Tom Brice as well, so they've both gone on to another lap. You're looking at Tom Brice here for IC West, and as the Senior Vice President's driver comes out the corner, goes a bit wide there, a bit of understeer. I think having to force the nose forward to stop the rear coming around. These Porsche Cup cars definitely not making it easy, and this technically challenged circuit of what is MotorLand Aragón definitely keeping our drivers on their toes as much as possible. Anthony Piper heads to the line. He's yet to get a lap on the board. What's this going to be? Does he get a bad lap on the board? The answer is going to be no. So Piper does not get a time in. He'll be starting for the very back of the field as Daniel McConnell's coming to the pit lane. So the only driver out there right now is Tom Brice, but I believe Brice right now on essentially what could be considered a cool-down lap here, as they only do get, from what I understand, 3 flying laps available to them. So Brice using this as a bit of a research lap, just to see where the grip levels are, and also just to get his eye in on some of the corners here. He heads down towards that braking zone for turn at number 13. But as he does, well, right now he'll know that his task is going to be a little bit harder because the lap standards is, whilst there only may be a 9-car field today, what we should always say is that quantity does not always guarantee the quality of racing, but we do have plenty of quality in amongst the pack of drivers we do have here, and therefore we've got an exciting race ahead. And Brice, if the lap stands, will be starting in 6th place, and we'll know that he's got a whole pack of AMs to pick his way past before he can go hunting after the pole position driver in the Pro class of Matt Best. So Brice makes his way on down there, very casually does so, and as he does, well, Shahi Zahair, a bit of a surprise, will be starting from 3rd place in the AM class, or what is 4th overall, and he's going to be sat there right now as we jump inside the car. What he thinks to himself as he stares off into distance, what exactly do I need to do to find a whole 7 tenths to close the gap to Mark Senegal? Because the ITDUS Senior Vice President's driver, with Blake Phillips not here, on paper, you would have imagined he would have been the favourite to put it on pole, and he would be the favourite for this race. However, it does seem as though the story is going to be a bit different today, and he's also got Joshua Dillon between himself and Mark Senegal, and that is perhaps another surprise as well. You've got a debutant here today who's immediately put one over the championship leader in the AM class, and therefore, I mean, Shahi Zahair has got his work cut out for him. This is not going to be a straightforward run. But then again, we do know that Zahair goes a bit stronger in the race than he normally does in qualifying when such circumstances occur, so you can't rule him out. Daniel McConnell, meanwhile, the Texas Speed Sim Racing Pro driver, alongside teammate Matt Best, part up at the end of the pit lane there. Last of valid lap set, albeit 7 seconds off the fastest laps. That was a bit more of a banker reference lap. But either way, ladies and gentlemen, as we take a look to the scenic view, it is time for us to head to the grid for our one and only race day in round number 5 of the Fall Into PCUP Championship for 2025, brought to you by the Middle of the Pack Racing League. So the drivers make the way onto the grid. This is how they'll line up then for the 5th round of the championship and the commencement of our 2nd Cup of the season. And as we can see, making the way into the middle of the Pack Cup, it is continuing the momentum on from where he left off at Long Beach. Matt Best, who takes pole position overall in pro for Texas Speed Sim Racing. Joining him on the front row is the pole sitter of Mark Senegal for Chance Sunday GT Turtles. 5.5 tenths off that pole time, but still a brilliant effort there for the Canadian driver, and he'll be very much pleased with that. Joshua Dillon, on his debut, starts in 3rd, the privateer, just ahead of Shahi Zahair, albeit Zahair 6 tenths down, but he'll be hoping that's not the sign of what's to come in the race for ITUS Senior Vice Presidents, with Jermaine Warren starting 5th, ahead of Tom Brice, the 2nd of our pro drivers, who starts 6th for ITUS Interns Pro Esports Division. Glenn Bratton begins the day 7th, ahead of Daniel McConnell for Texas Speed Sim Racing. And last but not least, it is going to be Anthony Piper. On his debut, did not get a valid lap on the board, but to be fair, I suspect he will be thinking to himself, okay, all my work is upwards from here, and we look forward to seeing what he's going to be able to do from starting 9th place on that grid. That's how they're all set, ladies and gentlemen, and we are only waiting the best part of 50 seconds or so before we do go green flag racing for the 5th time this season. And as they all eagerly await going racing, we can understand right now if all these drivers are thinking that there's a big opportunity to score points here today with the absence of quite a few individuals on the grid. But that's the one thing as well, it's risk versus reward. You've got to be brave, you've got to be confident to try and make this count, and therefore you can't be guaranteed any results, because remember, of course, championship regulation-wise, it is the situation whereby drivers score based on their overall finishing position first and foremost. 50 points are available for 1st place, 48 for 2nd, and we work our way downwards from there. And for the AM drivers, for Mark Senegal in particular, there are bonus points available for 1st, 2nd and 3rd in class. 3 for 1st, 2 2nd, for 1 for 3rd. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the lights go on. It's time to go racing. And as the revs rise, it's time to roar here in Spain as it's lights out and away they go for round number 5 of the championship. Matt Best gets a good start there as they make the way down, and as they do, well, right now it does. See if there's no Mark Single going in fence. Was there contact between them? I think there was. They both go out wide. The rest of the field scatters on through, and immediately it's a dramatic start here. Best and Senegal touch, and therefore Shahi Zahair takes the lead of the race with Joshua Dillon behind him. Daniel McConnell up the inside into turns 2 and 3, fighting on with Tom Brice. Well, McConnell, he may not have had the best qualifying performance, but to be fair, right now the Texas Speed Sim Racing driver, wherever the time was missing in qualifying, he suddenly found it between qualifying and the race. I don't know if they managed to inject to a lot of pace, alternatively whether he was hiding it, but either way, as they make the way up towards turn number 7, well, right now these drivers are all very eager to make a good impression straight from the outset. McConnell ahead of Brice, then leading pro drivers, but it is for the first time in quite some time we're seeing an AM leading ahead of 2 other AMs. And will we see an all-AM podium? If so, that would be the first time in the middle of the pack racing league's history where we've seen an overall podium completely locked out by a lower class, if you will. But right now Shahi Zahair comes out of turn number 10, and as he does so, Joshua Dillon's there. Glenn Bratton ran a little bit wide, being on the privateer driver there. Well, the beast is with him on the side of the car, but right now that Porsche is proving quite beastly to keep under control. Jermaine Warren, well, he's all over the back of where's Tom Brice there, and looking for the move is the lime green MPRL machine as he heads down towards turn number 13. And well, it's going to be Brice who holds the outside. That's tactical because therefore he can pick up the slipstream of Daniel McConnell. I think Warren here's got the bit between his teeth. He is going to try and outbrake his rival as they make the way through the left-hander, and he is going to stay as is for now between these two as they make the way up the hill. And as they do so, well, we are just going to refresh our overlay, as that's had a little bit of a glitch, ladies and gentlemen, and the drivers make the way on to another lap. So Shahi Zahair still leads after 1 lap ahead of Joshua Dillon. Behind them, it's then Glenn Bratton who sits in 3rd place at the moment, as Daniel McConnell sits in 4th. He is your pro leader. Tom Brice sits in 5th ahead of Jermaine Warren, with Matt Best, Anthony Piper and Mark Senegal completing that running field. And all these drivers right now really now starting to build up the pace and trying to get a little bit more into the race. And we do apologise there for the absence of our overlay. We are just trying to fix that in the background, and hopefully we'll make an overlay back in due order. But either way, right now, as Piper and Senegal go battling side by side here, and there's our overlay back as quickly as we can. Piper ran a little bit deep, and as a result, Senegal gets on through. As meanwhile, out wide, there's Daniel McConnell at turn number 7, and as McConnell's had a bit of an excursion there, well, that is going to up the door for Brice. Warren also gets on through there. We'll have to get a replay of what exactly happened there shortly, as well as the altercation right at the start of the race. It's been a bit of a dramatic start here, as Shahi Zahair, meanwhile, has now got Joshua Dillon catching. But noticing there that Dylan ran a bit too wide coming out of turn number 10. He'll get away with it a couple of times, but too many times he may pick up a drive-through penalty. But here's a little bit of a team altercation there, an inter-team altercation. That's the words I was looking for. Matt Best and Daniel McConnell coming down through turn number 11. And well, Best does get ahead of his teammate there. McConnell backs off, lets him go. And I think McConnell here is going to try and follow Best all the way around the circuit if he can and use Best as a little bit of a bulldozer. But meanwhile, trying to bulldoze his way into the lead of the race is Joshua Dillon looking up the inside of Zahair, who goes out nice and deep from turns 13 and 14, but runs a bit too wide. Here comes Dillon then. Dillon's got all the momentum as they head up towards turn 1, in towards 90 right, they get ready to go. And onto the brakes. Dillon there backs off for now. He knows there's an opportunity, but he can't make it work, at least for the time being. As meanwhile, we've had a bit of an off for Tom Brice, who's almost ended up in the wall there at the pit lane entry. Not quite sure how he's ended up there, but Brice has fallen all the way down the order, and Jermaine Warren as well has been caught up in a bit of an instant. So therefore, we've had a bit more shuffling, and all that shuffling is definitely catching out several drivers here. Shahi Zahair and Joshua Dillon, meanwhile, continue to put the pressure on each other to outperform one another and move upwards in the running order as they make the way in towards turn number 7 for the 3rd time today. But as they do, we take a look back at some of the moments of the start of the race, including the lap 1 incident between Matt Best and Mark Senegal. So this was between our two leaders. They made their way down to the opening braking zone. As they did, a tiny tap there, I think, for Senegal on Best, and that's what sent him around. Can we get a replay of the race start? I think we can. And I think we are trying to get the on board with Mark Senegal, and here we go. And let's just listen in for a brief moment. Plenty of wheel spin there for Mark Senegal. Absolutely nailed the second phase of launch, however, and on the brakes, went all in, and you could hear the crunch there of what was bumper to rear bumper, and Mark Snell just a little bit too enthusiastic and tapping the rear of Matt Best and sending them both off into the runoff area. We then had this for Jermaine Warren on lap number 2, and this was Warren making his way on around through turn 10 into 11. At rear of the car stepped loose there and went all the way around, and that explains why Daniel McConnell was letting Matt Best go. It wasn't because Best had come up behind him that rapidly, it was because McConnell had to take evasive action there to avoid being collected by the wayward car Jermaine Warren. So that explains the story. We also had this for Tom Brice meanwhile, and this was Brice coming out the final corner on lap number 2, heading through turn number 14. Tight steering lock in the rear of the car, just stepped loose, locks up the brakes straight into the barrier there. And we can understand Brice's initial reaction was, I've got to get the car stopped, it's going to go straight into the pit lane. And then it hooked on the front left brake, hit the barrier, able to carry on racing. But I can imagine now with a damaged car, that's going to prove quite painful as we make our way back to your live racing. So as we come on back, still more racing to come, no doubt about it, and time gradually trickles away here in Spain as we see Shahi Zahair and Joshua Dillon still together, and Glenn Bratton 4 seconds back, but he's got Matt Best all over the back of him now like a bad rash. Best looks up the inside. That's cheeky from Best. To be fair, he knew he wasn't going to get away with it. It has been a bit of a cheeky pass. You wouldn't argue it's pushed to pass, given the fact he hasn't really pushed Bratton in the end. What he's done, he's got his nose in there. They realised, okay, that's not going to work. I'm accidentally going to send the privateer and driver around, so he's backed off. But Bratton's had to give the door open because of the slight tap, and then as a result, because they've both backed off, Best has then been able to get through with better traction coming out the corner. So Bratton tucks in behind right now. I can imagine you'll be grateful that Best did not push his luck there with regards to the move. As meanwhile, pushes his luck around the outside. Again, it's Shahi's there trying to defend into turn 13. There's Dillon looking for the move. Coming out to the final corner. And on to the next lap they go. But back to Best and Bratton. Will Best get some through there. But to be fair, realised his mistake before it's too late. And that goes to show you what is a pro driver there when he knows that they're not faultless pro drivers. Much like AMS, they're always learning. But Best definitely know when he's got it wrong and trying to be as fair as possible in fighting for that 3rd place. But also trying to be as quick as possible in doing so, because he wants to win here today and he wants to take control of the championship before we do make our way to Japan in a week's time. So Bratton now falls to 4th place with Mark Senegal catching up quite quickly, having fallen all the way down the order. The Sunday GT Turtles driver is not going at a Turtles pace right now. If anything, he's going like the hare as he makes his way up towards turns 4, 5 and then 6 and 7 very shortly after. But as he does so, Daniel McConnell also trying to play catch up. Albeit McConnell's had a bit of misfortune over the last couple of laps and is falling away to Jermaine Warren, Tom Brice and Anthony Piper. Speaking of Piper, well, he's been a little bit of misery over the last couple of laps from a couple of unenforced errors. Seeing him fall further away from the field, now 34.2 seconds off the leader. But to be fair, still trying to keep it together here and looking to learn from each and every mode of racing. And that's what the best do become in the end when they're learning. Every time having a spin, as much as frustrated in the heat of the moment, you learn from it and you don't make the same mistake twice, or at least that's the target. But back to your leader. Well, Shahi Zaher was under pressure from Joshua Dillon come the end of the previous lap as Dillon looked to the move on the inside and down into turn 13, but this time it seems though Dillon's a bit further back. He is closing as a result of the slipstream, but they're already 2/3 the way down the back stretch as they head in towards turn number 13. Understandably here, Zaher can just take his natural race line. He doesn't have to think about going out nice and wide to defend even more, and the idea, of course, by going out that wide is you extend the run to the apex of turn 14, so you essentially straighten out the end of the corner at the cost of losing a bit of initial entry speed into the corner. So you're slingshotting your way round. Meanwhile, on the inside, it's a lot tougher because the problem is for Joshua Dillon, if he were to be side by side on the inside into the final corner, yes, he can get to the apex sooner than Zaher, but he can't get the throttle down in case he makes contact with him on the exit, so therefore he has to lift off the throttle at exit. But Daniel McConnell's into the pits, and as he makes way down, I wonder whether this is either for repair work of the car, alternatively, if this is due to instant points picked up, because this circuit with track limit is quite aggressive on them, but McConnell's car seems to be pulled to the pits, so therefore there's an issue with the car, and they're going to have to look into it when they can, the mechanics, as quickly as possible, because they want to get the Texas Speed Sim Racing number 73 back out there as soon as humanly possible. And in fact, he has come on in, he's used up a fast repair, and he's heading back out as I look out the control booth window. But right now, we're transfixed for the battle for third place in AM, fourth overall. It's Bratton who leads it, ahead of Senegal who follows it. As they come down in towards the Sakarokios chicane. Right now, the 227 from Canada is all over the back of his rivals. They make the way through turn 10. And for Senegal here, it's dealing with a lot of dirty air and it washes the front end of the car. But with the fact that these cars do not have the aero kits to say GT3 equivalent machinery, that massive rear wing is really what gives you most of the downforce in this Porsche Cup car. But Senegal's done a brilliant job of managing it, and now heading down the back stretch. Well, Bratton pulls the middle of the road, squeezes Senegal slightly to the outside, but he knows how far he can push his luck. And Senegal here hitting the limiter almost into sixth gear as they make the way down. And as they do so, well, right now, Mark Senegal makes way through and up into third place in the AM class. Their lovely move for Mark Senegal. Glenn Bratton was as firm and fair-handed in equal measure as he could be. And well, right now, Bratton's going to try and come back at him as they make the way on to another lap. Fastest lap of the race, it goes to Matt Best, a 38.75. So Best right now the fastest of everybody. In fact, faster than the leaders by the best part of what was a minimum there of 0.6 of a second in that lap. So I suspect we will see Best trying to carve his way past Joshua Dillon and then Shahi Zaher. And with the best part of 24.5 minutes remaining, you would imagine, based on doing a bit of quick mental mathematics, he will be there to start to try and pick up those places within the next 5 to 6 laps. And therefore that's going to be when we have got approximately what will be the best part of about 18 to 17 minutes of the race remaining. But meanwhile, as these drivers coming around, well, Mark Senegal and Glenn Bratton continue to fight, as meanwhile does Daniel McConnell fights with Anthony Piper, and in the end McConnell makes his way out the inside of Piper, and I get the feeling right now that for the number 3 driver here, it's just a slow and casual run around the circuit, and if there is any damage on the car, we don't know exactly, we haven't seen it happen, we can't see anything visually on the car. Anthony Piper definitely a bit off the pace at this time, and perhaps just focusing on running his own race and making sure he gets home for some key points to start off his championship charge. But as that fight ends, well, we come to Jermaine Warren, who has Tom Brice started to close up a little bit. Of course, they swapped places earlier on after Bryce's nasty moment with the pit entry almost, where he went straight into the barrier after losing it coming out to turn number 14, but he collected the car up enough to be able to manage it, not to get any worse or to force himself into the pit lane accidentally, although the irony would have been if he'd hit the wall and then gone into the pit lane, he would have then been able to use a fast repair to repair it, albeit he would have still lost more time from going down the pit lane on the speed limiter, of course, with many of these circuits around the globe with very tight speed limits. Meanwhile, Jermaine Warren there, well, he finds he's not too tight to the apex of turn 13 that time around. He runs out very wide, keeps 2 balls in the white lines of the track limit, but he won't keep making that mistake because he'll pick up a lot of marbles on the outside right tyres, and that's only going to hurt his grip even more onto the next lap. And mechanical grip is absolutely vital around here as he heads up the hill. But from him, we come to Zaher, and there we can see from our leader to your second place man, Joshua Dillon. Well, the gap is 2.6 seconds, and it is growing. Dillon seems to be struggling now at this midpoint in the race. I wonder whether he's exhausted his tyre life within the opening 10 minutes. He was quite aggressive at the start and was very keen to make the move. And as we have seen multiple times this season, the tyres on these Porsche Cup cars, they can be pushed hard for the best part of 20 minutes. However, you push them too hard, you can shorten that lifespan even more, and that's why the 35-minute sprint race distance is so interesting, in the fact that we do have what is the best part of 60% more time than what normally the maximum tyre life of the tyres on these cars allows. So therefore you've got to do quite a bit of tyre management to get the most out of the tyres over the entire race distance. But if you need to, you can extract the life out of them sooner. Just expect you'll be on the back foot towards the end of the race. But right now, as we head towards the midway point of the race, we ride on board from the privateer from the Pit Club Sim Racing. Joshua Dillon right now makes his way through that left-hander, and well, the number 280 driver here definitely feeling the heat as Matt Best gradually builds himself up. The only thing from Best's perspective right now, all that pace he's had in clear air as he sets a new fastest lap race, a 38.001. Best is flying out there. Is he still going to be flying when he gets into the dirty air of Dillon's car? Because that's going to change the aero balance of the car. And keep an eye on these Porsche Cup cars as well. Very unique in the way they're aero balance is already set in the car, particularly when you come to where the fuel tank is located. It's in the front, not the rear. So therefore, as these cars race, they get lighter naturally in the aero balance pitches. But that is Matt Best coming in very hot. He knows how much speed he's got into that braking zone, but he didn't recognise how much speed Joshua Dillon was going to have. And there's the difference of two drivers in terms of their knowledge and their braking zones. And in the end, Best careening into the back of Dillon, and a very similar moment to what Mark Senegal had with Matt Best on the opening lap. Well, right now, we've just seen it there where Best has come up very hot and not realised that the AM driver plans to brake a lot earlier. And it's not the situation whereby Dillon's brake test or anything along those lines. Yeah, that's the difference of an AM and a pro driver there, potentially, where it's just a difference in technique and skill level. And sometimes seen that some drivers brake a lot earlier than others, and therefore, Matt Best being caught out by that. And still, the cars are carrying on here, and Best has backed off to respect the fact that he's caused some damage. Albeit I think he will be looking for the move sooner rather than later, but he's going to have to now make it down this long back stretch. As we jump aboard with the Texas Speed Sim Racing at 11. And he heads on down here. The one thing he's got to keep in mind now is that damage to the front bumper going to slow him down on the straight. Well, the answer seems to be no. Eventually, he does get up the inside, and for Best, it's going to be a nice quick move there, or is it, as Dillon's going to try to hold the outside line? And in the end, Best does get ahead for now, but coming through 14. Dillon still with him as they make the way into the timeline. 20 minutes left on the clock, plus also a final lap to go, and Best does take that second place as Joshua Dillon too far back to look to go on the counter-attack. And as they come through into the opening section of the circuit, if Dillon can stay with him all the way to the exit of turn 10, I wouldn't be surprised if Dillon's going to try and look for a return move and go for the counter-attack, as he uses a bit too much road there and has to add some gravel onto his taxation list as he makes his way up towards turn number 5. We call that value-added tarmac, and as he makes his way through it, right now for Joshua Dillon in the 280 car, he's definitely looking fierce, he's definitely looking competitive, but I think he's just expecting too much of the tyre as he heads in towards turn number 7, and that gap to Best is now open up to 7/10. The other thing to have a keep in mind is what Dillon might be thinking of here is the fact that Best is going to get on the back of Zuhair soon, so therefore he would like Best to essentially cost Zuhair some time, and he might be in a position to retake the AM lead, but not if he makes a mistake like that, carrying a bit too much speed downhill for the apex at 8 and 9 and runs out wide. So Dillon has to bring it back together, but that's going to cost him half a second there. And right now, he's got all the intention in the world. Absolutely spot on here is Joshua Dillon, but a little bit too much enthusiasm, I think, for speed is just costing him the opportunity to stay with the top two. As the top two make the way on past our cameraman here, we can now see Zuhair at the distance with Best 6.5 tenths and closing quickly. We'll stay with the fight at the front. We have had a bit of an incident for Anthony Piper, which we will take a look back at very shortly. But right now, we're going to stay with this lead fight for a little bit longer because Best is on a charge here. And right now, nothing seems to be sliding down. Let's hold up a second. Shahi Zuhair into the pit lanes as Zuhair comes on down. And I think this is going to be strategy here because we do sometimes see in these sprint race. In fact, we've seen it all season so far. The need to come into the pits for a fuel pit stop. So therefore, Zahare's decided there's no point me fighting. I might as well come on in. I'm going to release him at Best, but I'm going to give myself every opportunity to make sure that Dylan cannot catch up to me. So Best takes the lead of the race. Mark Senegal moves to second, Glenn Bratton to third, and Jermaine Warren comes through into fourth place, with then Tom Brice making his way upwards, along with will be Daniel McConnell a bit further behind. But we will see when Joshua Dillon comes out. There he is. So Dillon's made his way on out. And he did not stop in the pit lane, did Joshua Dillon. So that's intriguing. He's just come straight on into the pit. So unless he's picked up a drive-through penalty for what would be instant points, which is highly possible to be fair, Zahare definitely did stop meanwhile. But Joshua Dillon there, a bit of an intriguing moment. We'll have to wait and see how this all plays out, because Zahare has fallen behind Dillon by the best part of 9.5 seconds, as you would perhaps expect because of the drive-through penalty. But Joshua Dillon right now, I think, will be feeling a degree of frustration here if this result is going to go against him, and he's going to have to come back into the pits, because that's essentially means 2 visits to the pits. He's going to add on to his race at least the best part of 20 seconds of time, and that's going to put him right out of contention, not just for the AM win, but potentially as well for the AM podium, which on his debut, well, that would be an absolutely dreamlike performance if he made his way onto the podium. But right now, it could be going the wrong way. As we look at Dillon and making his way off into the distance, well, we need to make our way back in time for a brief moment and take a look back at some moments for our drivers, including what's happened to both Tom Brice and also Anthony Piper. But starting off with Anthony Piper then on lap number 9, and what exactly went wrong for him. So this was for Anthony Piper making his way in towards turn number 5, went onto the brakes, went out 4, went a bit deep, and in the end I think downshifted another gear too soon, and the rear axle just lighting up there and going around. So in the end for Anthony Piper, an easy mistake to make, and well, even the very best to it, well, they know they've gone deep and suddenly want to downshift even more to conduct engine braking, but in the end what he actually ends up doing is spinning those rear wheels up, and the rear of the car just lets loose. This happened to Tom Brice, only wants to go on lap number 11 meanwhile, and this was wide out of turn number 10, tries to overturn into 11 to compensate. A lot of speed there, and the rear of the car started to step loose to the apex, and then a big slide, got the brakes on before it went to the wall, so well held there from Tom Brice, but understandably he will now have taken a lot of life out of the tyres as we do return to your live racing action. So back we come, and as we do, we've still got plenty more laps to be done. And at the very front of the field, of course, is still Best for now. If he is planning to come into the pit lane, presumably he will be soon, but he will be trying to get a couple more laps in on the fuel tank he's got remaining. So his idea will be he needs to commit to what would essentially be some qualifying laps here to make sure he leaps ahead of Shahi Zahare come the end of the strategy window. But as he makes way through turns 13 and 14, with a bit of damage on the front of the car, I suspect the fast repair will also go on to make sure that is quickly rectified. He does not duck into the pits this time, so he goes another lap. So he'll now make it 13 laps without the pit stop. Well, in fact, 12 laps without the pit stop, potentially 13 the next time he comes around. And with 15 minutes left on the clock, well, time is gradually burning down here in Spain, as the sun seems to also be gradually settling off in the distance. As we do have Mark Senegal, your AM leader at the moment. He's also staying out there, and to be fair to Senegal, he's absolutely doing brilliantly to recover this race. What was the difficult start, having started second on the grid, and then made that contact with Best. He fell all the way to the back of the order, but right now it does seem as though the Sunday GT Turtles driver has got his head in the game, and that's exactly what he needs to do. It's not about how you start a race, it's about how you finish it, and Mark Senegal is looking to finish it on a high. And now turns 5, 6, and then 7. And as he makes his way to the 7th corner, right now he's going to be thinking to himself, where's Jermaine Warren? And there is Jermaine Warren. He still is in 3rd place. And Warren is yet to pit, as has Joshua Dillon. And Shahi Zahare right now is the leading driver who has pitted in 5th place. And that's what we're waiting to see, is exactly what all these pit stops filter out. Presuming, of course, and everybody needs to make one pit stop at least for fuel. That has been the situation in sprint races so far this season. So we'd imagine that we'd expect that again. We have not seen any of the races be absolutely critically tight on fuel to enable what would be the no-stop strategy. But perhaps here today in Spain, we may see that happen. Always made to keep guessing, because the rules and regulation do say there is no mandatory pit stop in any of the races. You go with the fuel tank and the car you're given, and how you use it is entirely up to you. and that is what makes the Middle of the Pack Racing League so intriguing, and why the Porsche Cup in particular has been a much more intriguing season, perhaps from a strategic perspective compared to some other seasons. That's not to say they've not been exciting, to be fair, and indeed our Winter GR86 series, a brilliant example of that earlier on this year. But the fact we really have gone in for this season with the logic of you have a fuel tank that is defined, you also have the car available to you on a fixed setup. That's it. Whether you come into the pits or not in any race is entirely your call. You figure it out. Whereas previously it's been more stated clearly, you will need to come into the pits in the feature races, but not in the sprints. But right now, here in this sprint race time for this season, all the sprint races are completely open-ended like the feature races. But coming back to your leader, and Best right now continuing to push on around here. I think he'll be very happy the way the race is going, given how it started. And will demonstrate in some absolutely phenomenal pace as he's made his way back up through the field. And in this clear air, he is the only driver to be lapping recently in the 38s, I believe. In fact, no, he does have somebody who's matching his laps at the moment, and it is this man who was your overall leader and your AM leader before the pit stops, of none other than Shahi Zahair, who right now is lapping the 38.9s to Best 38.8. But it's normally only half a tenth, if that, between the two of them. And that goes to show you that Zahair has come a long way since the start of the season. And right now his pace is definitely looking professional level. Albeit he'll stay in the AM class for the remainder of the season, given the fact the aim of the AMs is to try and improve over the season. And that's all a big part of the game in becoming AM champion, is by the end of the season as an AM driver you were expected to have improved somewhat in order to become that champion, and therefore you get promoted to either a Prime class, if we do have one on the grid, or alternatively the Pro class. But speaking of the Pro class, Best is into the pits at long last. He has made that fuel tank go the best part of what is 27 minutes, and as he tiptoes his way on down the pit lane, well, right now for Matt Best, it's definitely been a good run over the distance, but right now he's decided enough's enough. He's got to come in as Anthony Piper leaves the pit lane after making a second pit stop. So Best will come on down. Mark Senegal, meanwhile, will now become your race leader. And, well, he's yet to pit, of course, as has Jermaine Warren. But Mark Senegal enjoying the fact he's going to lead an overall lap of this race. Joshua Dillon's into the pits for what will be a strategic pit stop. So we do confirm that that first pit stop was a drive-through penalty. But here's Shahi Zahair. Where is Best? Best is leaving the pit lane. And there he goes up the hill. And Matt Best has leaped over Shahi Zahair through going longer and deciding to keep pumping the laps in rather than come in early and try and go for the undercut or to match the hair strategy. And Best in the end has swung the timings by the best part of 5.5 seconds as car off the road there. That's Anthony Piper, who's gone from gravel to tarmac, and as he's brought it back on, he waits to go racing once again. He waits for his relative to be clear. A great awareness there from Anthony Piper to make sure he doesn't interrupt the race leader battle. But Best right now is your effective race leader as he heads down towards turn number 8, and all he needs to do at this point is keep drilling the laps one after the other, and if he's able to do so, he'll be coming away from here victorious and making it back-to-back victories following his win at Long Beach in round number 4. Still more to come, surely, as we look to Daniel McConnell. He chases after Tom Brice, and McConnell right now looking for that second place in the Pro class, with there only being 3 pros. They're all guaranteed to be on the podium today, but it's how they put themselves on that podium, and that is going to be the question that Daniel McConnell wants an answer to of, I want to be second, and therefore make it a Texas Speed Sim Racing 1-2. But if he run wide like that into turn number 5 again, he won't be making that happen, as he runs a bit deep there at turn number 7. And Daniel McConnell definitely got a lot of enthusiasm here, but right now just going a bit too deep into those loaded up corners, those medium speed apexes, and that seems to be where the mistakes are coming. Whereas Brice, he may not be as quick overall, but what he's definitely doing is making sure to hit his markers as best as possible, albeit runs a bit deep at turn number 10. Just about salvages the corner. McConnell mirrors what he does, and as they make their way down the back straight, there's nothing between them right now as they head up towards the big sweeping bends of turn 13 and 14. As he heads on through, another lap goes onto the board for race leader Mark Senegal. He tries to go a little bit longer here. Jermaine Warren at 7.5 seconds back, and it is Mark Senegal right now who's lapping in the mid-39s, whereas Warren is lapping in the mid-39s, but a tenth quicker. 39.4s for Warren, 39.5s for Senegal, and then you do have what is 39 flats for Shahi Zahair, and Matt Best, I suspect, is trying to cook up a few more high 38s if he can. In the Twitch chat, we do say hello there to the infamous Jerk, who's cheering on Anthony Piper and says, we'll get them next time. And to be fair, and credit where it's due to Anthony Piper in the Jaws machine, the fact that he might be several laps down at the moment, 3 laps down, is not stopping him from wanting to stay out there and get as much track time as possible, get as much experience as possible, and that's what we love to see. It does go a little bit deep there. The tyres definitely will be a little bit singed and hot as a result with slides and spins, but to be fair, he's going to try and nurse those tyres and get himself to the finish. He made his pit stop for fuel as well. All he needs now to do is get to the checkered flag. But speaking of getting somewhere, Mark Senegal gets his way to the pit lane, hits the pit limiter, and as he makes one down, well, right now for the Sunday GT Turtle driver, it's a quick visit to the pits, and I suspect Jermaine Warren will be following him. There is Warren, finally sees Senegal off in the distance, but of course that distance is going to be confusingly temporary because of the fact that he will be seeing Mark Senegal will leave the pit lane much earlier than him. Matt Best, meanwhile, he goes past the two of them on circuit, and he does return to your race lead then. He started on pole for it, and now after the best part of what has been 27 minutes, he's found his way back to the very front of the field again. So he's done it the hard way, but he's done it very well, and Shahi Zahir continues to run as your AM leader. Mark Senegal is the man who needs to chase him down. He leaves the pit lane, and as he does so, he's now got a 9-second gap to try and close down. With Jermaine Warren, meanwhile, well, he's been able to keep the gap steady to Mark Senegal in the pits at 7.5 seconds. It has not swung one way or the other, so good effort there from the 2-1-3 team. And as they head up the rise, well, right now for Warren, it's going to be about seeing if he can get close, if not hoping that Senegal can close up to Zahir and end up fighting him. And naturally, it will bring the top three of the AM class back together for what could be a very entertaining final couple of laps. But we will keep you abreast of the lap times and whether we will see that closure right at the end of the race. As things settle down here in Spain for a moment, all our drivers right now get to their heads down and just see what they can deliver. This is where, in the equinox period, we are going to start to see tyre life become a bigger and bigger factor, because the thing is, these tyres now have done almost 30 minutes of racing. They've gone well beyond their natural shelf life if you push them hard with 20 minutes of racing. It depends from circuit to circuit as well on the track conditions. They can have a bit more life or they can have a bit less. Normally at circuits such as MotorLand Aragón, where we normally expect the tarmac and the ambient conditions to be very hot regardless of the time of year, we do normally expect tyre life to be at a premium here. Normally you can only get a good 15 minutes out of the tyre compared to much cooler circuits, such as, for example, hypothetically speaking, looking at Okayama International in a week's time, there we might be able to see the tyres go 25 minutes depending on the ambient conditions before they do start to fall off their proverbial cliff. And that is going to be in the minds of many a driver here. As McConnell and Brice, they continue to exchange lap times if it's going out of style. But Brice on that last one was a whole second faster than McConnell, so I think he's now getting the upper hand. But speaking of getting the upper hand in the Zahir Mark Senegal battle, of course, Mark Senegal came into the pit lane on the previous lap, so we won't have an idea of exactly his lap times until probably the end of this one. But based on the first lap after their pit stops, Zahir was able to put an extra second over Senegal. Therefore, you would imagine that right now the ITT West driver will feel as though he's got this in control. Matt Best, meanwhile, is still holding on to that lead, opening it up now almost 6 seconds as they make the way into the mid-portion of this lap. And Best is absolutely trying to tear his way away here. As he makes his way down the back straight. Understandably, one of you might be sat there thinking right now, why is he not backing off perhaps and just managing the car a bit more? Well, there's two schools of thought with regards to this. There's firstly the school of thought, which is the worry that if you start to back off, the driver behind will close up, and you don't want that worry, particularly when you can see him as a distant pixel effectively in your rear view mirror. In the fact you can still see a set of headlights, you want those headlights to really disappear through most sections of the circuit. Perhaps not the backstretch, given how long it is. The Hermann Tilke trademarked 1 kilometre backstretch for reference. But right now for Matt Best, as he makes his way onto the start-finish straight, he'd ideally like that gap to be about 6 to 7 seconds. It'd just give him a little bit more breathing room in case he should make a small mistake. And the other school of thought with regards to why is he not backing off is the fact that some drivers, they struggle to back off, and as soon as they do try to turn themselves down from 100% to say 80% of the normal pace, that is where they actually start to make mistakes. And well, the late great Ayrton Senna was quite known for that, in the fact that when he was told to slow down by the team when he was leading races by considerable margins, it's normally when he did slow down that the mistakes started to occur. He was a driver who always had to drive on the very limit of what he could do, and in doing so, because of the adrenaline, because of the focus levels required, he never put a foot wrong. And to be fair to Matt Best, he may be one of those drivers. He can't do 80%. It's either 0 or 100. He doesn't know a middle ground. And well, if he is one of those drivers, he's doing a very good job right now of demonstrating to us the fact that he is able to go 100% for so long, even if the tyres are wearing away from him gradually. But as he brings turn number 10 to a close once again, we do look a bit further down the order to Jermaine Warren. your current third place man in the AM class. And well, his lap times versus Mark Senegal, they're quite similar, the two of them, albeit lap time is creeping in the favour of Mark Senegal little, by a tenth or two, as we did have a small micro lock up there on the front left brake for Jermaine Warren coming down the hill. But that goes to show you that he's putting in the effort right now to see if he can match Senegal and potentially make a point to him afterwards, which is that he's on the pace, and therefore next time out Okiyama he may be able to beat him in the race. Because we're a 7.2 second gap at the moment, he's going to need Senegal to make a complete hash brown of the circuit somewhere. But something tells me that may not happen, as meanwhile that is Daniel McConnell parked up. He's parked up there on the exit of turn number 7, and well, McConnell's had to tow to the pit lane there for a nasty moment with only 4 minutes to go. That's heartbreak there for Texas Speed Sim Racing when they were looking so good for a double result today. But what exactly has happened to McConnell? Well, the good news is we can find out, but the bad news is we're going to have to see what exactly went wrong. So here we go, and this was Daniel McConnell coming through turn 6 into 7. Hard on the brakes he went, rear of the car came loose a little bit there. He lifted off the brakes to let the car straighten out, and in doing so went to the tyre barrier, and it was a gentle tap, but I think that gentle tap has done enough damage to the suspension. This was the onboard. Went on the brakes there, and in fact, wasn't that hard on the brakes. I think he might have just misanticipated the amount of brake force he needed, and that's what led him to the barrier. And after that, McConnell in the barrier, couldn't find a way out, and that was his race. Back to your live racing, ladies and gentlemen. Well, as we come back on board with Joshua Dillon for a brief moment and then jump out the car. Well, Dillon right now still on the road and still keeping it together nicely. Albeit I think he'll be a bit gutted to be down in 7th place today with that drive-through penalty, really scuppering his chances of a podium on his maiden race in the AM class. But to be fair to him, when all is said and done, he's definitely shown some great signs of pace today, and therefore the AM driver, I think we're thinking to himself, come at the end of the season, there's definitely some more opportunities here to score quite big. But the Pit Club Sim Racing driver just eking his way on around right now, and understandably wanting to see the finish line. To many of our drivers here, including Matt Best, who we do see a message from there in the YouTube chat, saying if he tries to back off and take it easy, bad things happen. So therefore, well, he's of that mentality. It's 100 or 0, and right now he's definitely a guide for 100 here, or 50 points we should say. It's half of 100, but right now it's definitely been a good first half of the season, and for Matt Best, he is continuing into the second half of the season exactly how he finished it, and with a minute left on the clock. Well, this might be the final lap. We may squeeze in a 22nd lap. We're going to be very close either way. So, therefore, we're not going to step too far away from the Texas Speed Sim Racing driver. As we do briefly come back to the second place man of Shahi Zahair. And for Zahair, I think he'll be a little bit sad that he hasn't had his rival Blake Phillips on the grid today. It would have been great to see the two of them, a very different style of circuit once again, see who is the stronger compared to the other or whether they were equal. But right now for Shahi Zahair, he's had to get on with what he's got, and credit where it's due to Mark Senegal. Mark has done a great job in qualifying, didn't quite live up to it in the race, unfortunately due to the altercation between himself and Matt Best right at the start. However, I think he'll think to himself, if I hadn't had that, I might have been able to keep Zahair under pressure over the distance, perhaps even beat him. So therefore, Senegal definitely announcing himself as a viable contender as this season continues to wind on, but he's just not been able to land the points he so much wanted today. But as they make the way then down the backstretch, well, with only 8 seconds to go, this is going to be the end of the race, ladies and gentlemen, because the checker flag comes out, and as he makes his way to the line, he took victory in Long Beach only 2 weeks ago, and Matt Best continues with his winning ways here at MotorLand Aragón, winner overall in Pro for Texas Speed Sim Racing. Shahi Zahair will come home with the AM victory here, making it another win, his 4th of the season in class, and then we will have 9.5 seconds before we do get to Mark Senegal, who heads to the line into the pits there. Ducks Barber drives that. Anthony Piper, who'll be your last finisher of this race, but Mark Senegal will be your runner-up in AM, 3rd overall. And then Jermaine Warren has a spin right out the final corner. He goes round. Can he get it turned around to the finish line in time? He's got time to do so with Glenn Bratton being 22 seconds back. So Jermaine Warren there ends up finishing his race in some questionable style. Although 10 out of 10 for sticking the 180-degree spin. And well, he takes 4th, 3rd in the AM class. And then we will have Glenn Bratton who makes it on down. As you can see some donuts being done there by Best and Zahair in the distance. He'll want to join, but he'll take 5th place as the smoke completely obscures our cameras. But thankfully we've got some other cameras on the start finish straight. Tom Brice is your run-up in Pro then in 6th place there for ITD West. And and we will have Joshua Dillon on his debut, completing our lead lap finishes in 7th place there for the Pit Club Sim Racing, and a solid effort, but it's just not the way the result came to him today. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, as Shahi's ahead demonstrates just how much tyre you can burn off of these Porsche Cup cars, and I suspect the team will be talking to him afterwards and saying we needed those tyres for later. Well, without further ado, let's take a look to the scenic view, and with it, your race results subject to any assurance inquiries, and here they are. So after a brilliant 35 minutes of racing in round number 5 of the Middle of the Pack Racing League Fall Into Porsche Cup Championship for 2025, as brought to you on iRacing, well, we definitely got to see today that sometimes it's not about quantity of drivers on the grid, it's about the quality. And Matt Best put himself first and foremost at the very top of that quality spectrum with a brilliant win for Texas Speed Sim Racing, and had to do it the hard way. For whilst he may have qualified on pole, that early incident into turn 1 between himself and Mark Senegal put him all the way to the back of the field, but he maintained his pace, he maintained his composure, and despite a few brief bumps with the likes of Joshua Dillon, was able to make his way through, both on track and on strategy, to take the win for Texas Speed Sim Racing ahead of your AM winner. Speed home, Shahi Zahair, another AM win for the ITD West Senior Vice President's driver. May have in the end started 4th on the grid today, down towards 3rd place in the AM class, but in the race is where it mattered most, and the Sri Lankan driver there in the 209 making his way through to a brilliant victory. Mark Senegal, runner-up in the AM class, and the Sunday GT Turtles driver, if he can repeat that qualifying performance and just fine-tune his race, there's no reason why he cannot take the fight to his hair next time out, with Jermaine Warren landing another AM podium. A great result there for the privateer from the Middle of the Pack Racing League, and the American driver will be smiling about that one. Glenn Bratton, a 5th place there, a solid result, not quite on the pace today, but still able to keep it pointed in the straight line, with Tom Brice's few spins meanwhile seeing him relegated behind Bratton and having to settle not just for 2nd in Pro, but 6th overall for ITD West Interns Pro Esports Division. Then completing your lead lap finishes, it was Joshua Dillon, who on his debut for the Pit Club Sim Racing put together a brilliant qualifying performance and also delivered some brilliant racing, but unfortunately a drive-through penalty for track limits meant he had to settle for 7th, but he will know that if he can avoid the pesky instant points, the next time out he can be going for a podium in class, if not outright and victory. 3 laps down, but classified, Daniel McConnell there for Texas Speed Sim Racing were frustrated into his race after going straight on at turn number 7, and Anthony Piper, a further lap down there, still classified as well, 9th place. Well, on his debut, a bit of a challenging one, but still plenty of learning to do, and we expect him to come on stronger in a week's time. So 9 starters, 9 finishers, some of which on the lead lap, ladies and gentlemen, and that brings our racing to a close here in Spain at the Circuito de Alcaniz, or MotorLand Aragón, depending on your preference of name. And with that, of course, it does mean it's now time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed today's show, and perhaps you're sat there right now wanting to know more about the Middle of the Pack Racing League community, or how you can be on the grid for the remainder of this season or a future season at the MPRL, well, for all that and more, we definitely recommend you join the official Discord, invite link available on screen. It's the beating heart of the community, and there you will not find a more friendly sim racing community, primarily based on the North American continent, but to be fair, has played welcome and host to drivers from all around the world, from the United Kingdom all the way through to Japan. But if you don't want to join the Discord, perhaps you're a little bit shy or more of a social media person, you can of course follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/MOP Racing, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news from the Middle of the Pack Racing League and also the trials and tribulations of the Middle of the Pack esports teams. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, we now turn our attentions to next time out, and after a brilliant opener for our 2nd Cup of the season, the story will continue in a week's time with round number 6, seeing us make our way to Japan for our Japanese doubleheader. It'll begin at the Okayama International Circuit, and the racing, whereas it will be on Wednesday the 12th of November. We invite you to come join us as we're live on Sunday the 16th of November 2025 and see how our drivers get on through the twists and turns of Okayama. But until then, we've been the Middle of the Pack Racing League. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX11 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, much like our drivers, remember to stay on track. Good night.